Chapter 24. Data log primed for transmission, Commander, said Jess, and his voice dripped spite like Lara had never heard before. Affirmative. Proceed, over, said Pop. Lara had pulled the Nemesis relay out of the internal console and made a few adjustments while Jess was finding the trader's data log. She watched now as the information flashed across the portable screen in lines of code. She'd also tapped into Max's cameras, although she didn't have the equipment to tie into the suit's computer. Coming through loud and proud, ground leader, said Pop, and Lara hated him, despised each sound of his stupid lying voice. Jess was right. Teep and Pulaski wouldn't be dead now if Pop had put the lives of the team ahead of his loyalty to the company. She looked at the block of monitors and saw stealthy movement across the screens. She didn't know what to expect, what any of them could expect now that the Queen was dead. There had to be hundreds of drones left alive on the terminal, and many of them had started towards the trader, but not in the screaming rampage she'd assumed. The internal system had solid visuals for over half of the station, and the hissing, sliding creatures she saw were scattered throughout, alone or in small groups. They were moving past cameras, slinking down corridors in the shadows, but their actions were slow, unhurried, as if the death of their queen left them without a clear goal. It didn't matter. The primary log for the trader had been transferred to Nemesis. The rest was just a backup. They could all leave now, get Ellis out of Max, get on with dealing with their losses. And I can start my file for disciplinary action against Pop, she thought, and smiled grimly. She had a hell of a lot to say about both his actions and the company's. As soon as they hit base, she was going to do everything in her power to see Eric Izzard busted for dereliction of duty and sexual harassment. And the company had violated about 50 laws alone by the very existence of the trader. And just what actually happened to the initial distress signals from 949? She didn't believe that. There hadn't been any, not anymore. And she was going to talk loudly about it and keep talking until somebody listened. For now, though. The rest is automatic, Pop, she said through clenched jaws. You don't need them. You can call it. Over? Of course, said Pop. It's called. Well done, people. Rest assured, I'll certainly be taking your complaints up with the company. He paused, and Lara suddenly wished she could see his face. He sounded blank, his rough voice colourless, unreadable. Was he sorry for Teep, for Candyman? She doubted that he was worried about Ellis, but the team that he'd led for months, the men he joked with, ate with. Did he feel guilt, depression, anger? He's like one of the drones, her mind whispered. Alien. No way to tell what's going on with him. Not anymore. She shuddered in the sour, cool air of the communications room, and looked back at the screens where the displaced aliens wandered and crept randomly. There's an auxiliary airlock 1 level below your docking bay, ground leader, said Pop. Make for that. I'll send the shuttle and you can pick up Lara on the way back. Lieutenant, monitor visually until they reach the ship and then prepare to evac. Everyone copy? Yo, said Jess, and Lara saw him through Max in the ruined trader, checking his rifle, expression tight and angry. Copy, said Lara, and walked to the monitor block, readying herself to do what she could. She called up the few operating cameras that strung the path to the auxiliary and took a deep breath, tried to psych herself up for their journey. She was tired and feeling pain, but Jess and Ellis would need her clear, in control, watching for ambush. Lara studied the monitors and the breath caught in her throat. Jess, Ellis, look sharp. You've got multiple hostiles in between you and where you need to be. The drones crept and hissed, and Lara wondered suddenly if the terrible breed didn't have some kind of a plan after all. She tapped buttons, her dread deepening exponentially with each view. Every corridor she scanned was lined with dark bodies, as if they knew that their queen's murderers would have to leave eventually, and it didn't look like the creatures meant to let them escape. You hear that, Ellis? We're getting out of here, back to Nemesis, but it ain't gonna be easy, do you understand? Ellis heard, and Max looked at Jess, a human surrounded by angles and lines of equipment in the room they had stopped. The vessel's operations room, data transferred. Completed, 274.7 seconds. Understand? It was getting harder to speak. Vocal communication a strain on the body that the program resisted as unnecessary. The correct words weren't there either. Ellis had to struggle against his own mind to find the meanings and then against Max to convey those meanings. Yes, Jess. How? He managed, frustrated, but it was the best he could do. In the time it had taken to speak, Max's sensors had measured the distance between 7 light emitters on one of the panels in the room and calculated every possible combination of chronological patterning. Jess seemed to understand. We just want to get out, okay? So don't strain yourself blowing up shit that don't matter. And you lead, I guess. I don't want to get in your way if it's bad, right? Ellis realised that he couldn't feel his lips moving. Not hurt you, Jess. The sounds that the man made in response were soothing and soft in his mind, with a strong pleasure association for Ellis. But the exact meaning was lost to Max. Ellis understood that Jess was happy with him, that it was time to go. It would have to be enough. Max shifted and turned, the program adjusting movement and providing weapons breakdowns and capacity as Ellis's legs flexed and relaxed. The sensors tracked smoke and shifts of erosion in the lifeless nest. Lifeless, but far from still. Max picked up all kinds of movement that Ellis and Jess wouldn't have seen, categorizing it as non-threatening while they moved towards the ship's entry. As they approached the opening, the sensors marked 6 lifeforms outside the vessel, etched green lines of alien bodies across Ellis's vision. The Max raised its arms as Ellis relaxed into the movements, aware that Jess was safely 1.61 meters behind. Ellis, Jess, I got drones on the stairwell at 1 o'clock, maybe 30, and it's the fastest way to the auxiliary. Lara, thought Ellis, and just had time to feel comforted by her voice before Max opened up, his mind too full of numbers and configurations to feel anything else. Jess raised the M41, his focus narrowing to the task at hand. Get out of here alive, get the kid out. The Max could certainly take care of itself, but Jess wasn't so sure about Ellis. The young tech didn't sound so good, like the suit was eating him up. As a leader, he may have failed Teep and the Candyman. It was something he was going to be thinking about for a long time, assuming they got out of this in one piece. But his responsibility now was to get Ellis to that shuttle, and he meant to do it, or die trying. There were a half-dozen drones outside the ship, and Jess targeted the closest, and watched it blown into 100 shrieking pieces before he could squeeze the trigger. Max swept its left arm smoothly, took out the others in a rapid patter of rounds that devastated the bugs' bodies. Limbs and skulls split and shattered, the dark monsters taken down in a precision that defied Jess's perception of movement. Like the bugs stood still, even though he had seen them running only seconds before. The Max stepped forward and paused, then raised the grenade launcher again, this time at the entry Jess had been carried through to get to the nest. Jess looked but saw nothing as Max lobbed 4 grenades at the open door, the caps white. Incendiaries. M60 phosphorus rounds. They exploded in quick succession, and Jess heard screeches of pain and saw flumes of movement amidst the sudden blinding curtain of fire and white smoke. Mother of God, kids see through walls now. Where? Whispered Ellis, and Jess found the stairs that Lara had called and pointed, still stunned by the awesome force of the suit in action. Keep back, said Ellis, and the Max strode towards the closed door. The right arm pivoted sideways and unleashed a fresh jet of flame at the burning entry across the bay. The fire met a trio of drones that had leapt through the smoke, frying them just as they landed. All were cooked in an instant, not even enough time to scream before they died. I'm gonna take him to the shuttle? Who the fuck am I kidding? Jess jogged after Max in the smoky haze of the wasted bay, rifle ready, but nothing to shoot. He stopped as Max reached the door, sidled to the left, and trained the M41 to give cover, and felt his eyes widen as Max walked straight into the door, through the thick metal as though it wasn't there. Shrill, trumpeting cries filled the bay as Max was suddenly surrounded by teeming blackness. Drones tore past the Berserker, scrabbled through the torn frame and ran at Jess in a furious dark joy, their terrible skulls grinning and sleek. Jess opened up, afraid and screaming himself, a wordless cry of rage that came from deep inside. And then there was just the heat, black and moving and consuming like midnight fire.